Okay, ready whenever you are.
Tuesday at 7:30 a.m., my mother drove my brother Parker and I to Annie Pearl Elementary in Georgetown, Texas. We walked down the hallway and parted ways, and I called after him. He was in kindergarten. He marched down the kindergarten hallway. I called after him to say hello. He turned around, didn't want to have anything to do with me as I continued singing and skipping down to my second grade classroom. We walked in, got settled. I met up with all of my friends, and about 30 minutes into the class, a frightened teacher from the hallway is listening to a radio broadcast, and I hear her start to weep. I'm confused, and my brother and I walk within the hour back up to the carpool line where my mother had just recently dropped us off, and I saw this scene play out over and over again, several teachers in the hallway crying. It wasn't until I realized when we got home the national tragedy that had just occurred within the hour of me being at school. I remember sitting down and thinking as a 7-year-old how strange it was. Our day had started out normally. We woke up, we got dressed, we went to school. It didn't make any sense to me that this had just happened. And I think the same was true for most Americans on September 11th, 2001, including the New York City Mayor, Rudolph Giuliani. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, his address that he gave on September 11th, 2001, and the impact of his speech and actions following this press conference. So who is Rudolph Giuliani? He was born in 1944 in Brooklyn, New York, to a middle-class family. His parents were Italian immigrants, so he developed a strong sense of work ethic as well as an American ideal for equal opportunity, and this really influenced his politics later. In 1968, he graduated from New York University Law School, and then from 1970 to 1993, he had a vibrant career in the justice system. He served as an associate attorney general, a deputy attorney general, and the U.S. Attorney General for the New York State. His big, I guess you would call it, his thing that he really advocated for was organized crime and welfare. And so he had a lot of success in that. He gained a lot of popularity with the people by stomping down on organized crime and really getting to the point where he was being able to convict a lot of those criminals, as well as working to have a vibrant and healthy welfare system. In 1989, Rudolph Giuliani ran for mayor of New York City, but he did not win, so he lost. And then in 1993, he won the first, becoming the 107th mayor of New York City, as well as in 1997, he was re-elected, and then this is his term that he served during 2001. In a Forbes interview with 10 years after the attack, he admitted to wanting to learn different leadership styles from different leaders. And so during his tenure, even 10 years later, he was still reading on how to become a better mayor. And so this really influenced his politics and really influenced his speech that he'll give later. Ultimately, though, the New York City citizens were the most important thing to him, and we'll get to this as we talk about his speech. It's said that as the New York tragedy hit, that he was actually working on a book, which he later published the next year, called Leadership. And then 3 hours after the collapse of the first tower is when we get to his speech. So the speech happened at a press conference at 2:40 p.m. And like I said, it was 3 hours after the first tower fell. So he was right around the block from where the planes hit, and then he traveled his way up, and there's a lot of news coverage of him walking in the street, but the speech that we're going to focus on is the one at the press conference. And unlike what the book says, it looks like it's supposed to just go in this fluent thing and he just stood up and gave the speech, but that's not actually what happened. Because it was a press conference, there were several questions. And so I want to take a second to look at this so you can see the kind of distractions that he might have had during the speech. So this is about a 1.5 minute video clip of the first part. And if you want to try to follow along in the book, you'll see how it's going to take a break and it's not going to be exactly what this transcript is.
Good afternoon. Today is obviously one of the most difficult days in the history of the city and the country. The tragedy that we're all undergoing right now is something that we've had nightmares about, but probably thought wouldn't happen. My heart goes out to all of the innocent victims of this horrible and vicious act of terrorism, acts of terrorism. And our focus now has to be on saving as many lives as possible.
Do we know the number of casualties at this point?
I don't think we really want to speculate about that. The number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear ultimately. And I don't think we want to speculate on the number of casualties. The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible.
There are positive reports of large loss of life among the police and firefighters who were trying to rescue people. How accurate are those reports?
There is no question that we lost police officers and firefighters, and some that I know personally, and all of us here know personally, that we're very worried about.
Thank you, sir.
So as you can tell by the video, he had a lot of interruptions that happened. So people are asking him questions, you can tell he's sweating. It's a very difficult time to stand there and give a speech. He's not able to just read a transcript and go and say what he wants to say. He has to take moments to pause and answer questions. So also in the video, you can notice that he has a very authoritative and competent tone. He's not trying to focus on saying what he doesn't know, he's trying to focus on saying what he does know, and he comes across as knowing what he's talking about, which in the wake of a national tragedy is a really important thing to communicate to people. He also has a calm demeanor, he's not panicked. Even though you can kind of tell from his brow that he's sweating, he's working really hard at maintaining a calm presence, and the people around him are working to do the same. And throughout the next few weeks, as he has to get up and give several more press conferences to the nation, he maintains this calm demeanor. He also acknowledges the tragedy, but conveys a sense of unity. So in the rest of the transcript, towards the end, he really tries to use unifying language about America and about our nation and about New York City. And this is really important that he does that, but also acknowledging the fact that this was a huge disaster. He doesn't stray away from the fact that what happened was a tragic, tragic thing. He also doesn't use any fluff or overpromise. He never says, even in the transcript, which we couldn't necessarily see in the video clip, but he doesn't say anything that we're going to save everybody and we're all going to do it in the next 2 weeks and everything's going to be fine. He doesn't use any sort of fluff or overpromise. He gets right to the point and says what he needs to say. An example of his sympathy and authority is, and we will strive now very hard to save as many people as possible. So you notice in this line, he's not saying, we're going to save everybody and this is how we're going to do it and it's going to happen and I believe it. He's saying we're going to strive very hard and we're going to work to make it happen. And so it's left, to translate whether or not for your own purposes, if this is really going to happen, but he doesn't try to overpromise something that he knows is not accomplishable. This is a picture of Rudolph Giuliani at a funeral. He's done this since the attacks, and he did it throughout the next few months following 9/11. And so this is just to show that the impact he had on the people and the impact that he felt from the citizens of New York. And so he's attending a funeral, I think this is 6 years later, of just a remembrance of a fallen, I believe it was a firefighter. And so this just shows that it takes a man of strong moral character to continue to be the face of hope for a nation in the wake of such a huge tragedy. So the impact that Rudolph Giuliani's speech had. He wanted to maintain peace, and so that's obviously noted by the fact that he came across as very calm and authoritative. And he wanted to maintain peace so much so in the masses that he hires a psychologist, Dr. Cohen, to come in and coach him on how to approach everybody, to approach citizens, to approach his lawmakers, on what was the best way to communicate what he needed to communicate without making everyone go into panic. And so Dr. Cohen meets with him the next day. And after kind of coaching him through it and watching Rudolph Giuliani succeed, one of the things that Dr. Cohen says is that he's blown away. I thought that was so funny to think that this psychologist says, well, I was just blown away at how he handles himself. But that obviously shows to someone that's in a profession that the way that he handled himself and the impact Giuliani's speech had was really a great one. This is my favorite quote. It says that our democracy, that our rule of law, that our strength and our willingness to defend ourselves will ultimately prevail. I think what I like about it is that it's just, again, it's real right to the point. He's not trying to overpromise anything or make anything sound really fluffy. He's just saying what he can do, and he's unifying everything together. The same year, in December, he was Time Magazine's Person of the Year in 2001. And so this just shows that, you know, some people could criticize this and say, well, of course he was the Time Person of the Year because it was 9/11 and he's the mayor of New York City. But I really honestly think that as I studied about Giuliani and I started to read about his other press conferences and watch his other videos, I would give him the same award just because he's having to bear a huge weight on his shoulders. He's having to be the face of hope for a city that experienced a great tragedy. On the same day, my great aunt was in the Pentagon, and so while she wasn't in the towers, I remember watching TV and hearing Giuliani's speeches and watching the press conferences over the next few weeks and having this sense that I knew that everything would be okay because I felt like he knew what he was talking about. And so whether or not he did, going back now I believe he did, but I was 7, but at the time I remember feeling this sort of, you know, a calm wash over me, knowing that the people that were getting on TV to talk about this huge thing, they knew what they were talking about. And while lives were going to be lost, I felt like everything was going to be okay. So today I talked to you about Rudolph Giuliani, his speech at the press conference 3 hours after the attack, and the impact that his speech had on myself and on the nation. And so I want to end with this, because it's 9/11 and I feel like being out of public school, we don't have a practice to do this. I'd like us to take a 20-second moment of silence to just reflect on 9/11 and to remember these leaders and the things that they did for us. So we'll do that. So I want to end with this quote, and it says, "The city of New York and the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists." That was the last line that he says before he thanks the governor, and I believe this is an important thing to leave you with today, because the threat of terrorism still exists, and us having grown up in the war on terror, I think we'd all say that we're very aware of what that threat is like, and we have a unique perspective on what he did and what this means for us. So I think we should just look back on the things that he did and the things he said and remember that he had to bear a huge weight, and he did it because he wanted to love the people and he wanted to give us a sense of freedom and a sense of protection. Thank you.